The February 8th, 2021 Select Board's meeting. This evening we have an agenda that includes our typical coronavirus community and programmatic updates, as well as some budget reviews. We also have a stipend committee and Blair Square committee update coming our way. For scheduling purposes tonight, I'm going to try to suggest that we move the stipend committee presentation up to the first position. Do we have members of the stipend committee on the call at this time?
I think they're still going with theirs.
They're still going. All right. So we'll table that for now and move into the coronavirus community update with you, Mike, if you have. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's delightful to be back in person with you all.
Nice to have you back.
We really enjoy your company, but, you know, no offense, but we want these to end sooner better than later.
I understand we're coming up on the year anniversary.
Yeah.
Soon. So, next slide, please. I'm pleased to report that we continue to trend down in terms of new cases. Since our last update last week, we've had only 16 additional cases, and those have been added to an additional cluster of single-family home, several single cases at single-family homes, one additional case at an elderly housing complex, and a couple single cases at multifamily dwellings. But our numbers continue to trend in the same pattern as the state and the region, so we are pleased that the second surge appears to be abating. Next slide, please. There we go. So just our trend line continues to show the growth that we've had in the last 11 months. But as I said, our number of recovered cases continues to climb, so hopefully we will be able to take off some more of our active cases in the very near future. In terms of our percent positivity, last week we were down to 3.58. The state was at 4.32. So for the second week in a row, we were in the yellow, which is the moderate risk category according to the Department of Public Health with their risk designation for communities. Looking at the map, when we went to yellow, several other communities around us also were in the yellow. Sherburne actually made it to the green last week. Framingham and Millis are still red, but Ashland, Hopkinton, Medway, and Natick are in the yellow. In terms of, just a reminder, we are still at the first section priority of phase 2 for adults 75 and older. And next slide. There should not be any surprise here. We're still all phases, all priority groups of phase 1 are eligible, as well as individuals 75 and older. Next slide. Last Friday, the governor announced a vaccine scheduling resource line for residents 75 and older. This is designed for individuals who do not have access to or are not comfortable using the internet to make their schedule for vaccines. And this is available through the 211 system, Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. They trained up a whole bunch of call takers who will assist individuals 75 and older with making appointments. Next slide. I am pleased to report that as of today, there are 2 sites in close proximity to Holliston that are eligible for statewide populations. When you look at the map, the green star are eligible populations statewide. The yellow ones, such as what you see in Walpole and Framingham and Natick, those ones are restricted to specific towns. But the green star, so the one at Milford Hospital and the one in Hopkinton, are eligible populations statewide, so Holliston residents would be able to, if they are part of an eligible priority group, such as anybody from phase 1 and individuals 75 and older, can now try and get an appointment at either Milford Hospital or the Hopkinton Senior Center. Obviously, the red star at Gillette is a mass vaccination site, and that is also for all statewide eligible populations. But for some, that's a little bit far for them to travel, so we're pleased that there are a couple of sites opening up nearby. Next slide. And we've seen a lot of questions as to why it is that Holliston does not have a vaccination site scheduled for individuals 75 and older. I just want to review that there were several requirements for the state for a community to be able to host a vaccination site. Those include an agreement, which is part of the Massachusetts coronavirus vaccination program. That is, they're having been onboarded with the MIIS system and able to report immunization data within 24 hours. And that was the key factor last fall that prevented the local Board of Health from hosting a flu clinic, was the cumbersome nature of the MIIS system and the requirement that all vaccinations had to be entered into the state system within 24 hours of administration. Obviously, depending on which vaccine is available, there are some storage and handling issues, location that would be able to support people coming in and not only having the vaccine but also being monitored, the challenges with scheduling and the challenges with staffing. So that's why at this point, the health department has not scheduled a local vaccine. In terms of some of our social media messaging, evidently there was a big game on yesterday, and we were very concerned that we might see an uptick in future weeks based on people not from the same household who may have spent some time together. We hope that people were safe yesterday and were able to watch it with those in their household and didn't risk additional infections by mixing household groups. And with that, I will pause.
Chief, you can breathe too. It sounds like that was all one big breath.
That was. I'm just so glad to be back.
All right, Ben, we'll start with you.
Okay, we certainly talk all the time, so, you know, we've had a lot of, back and forth about something, so.
Yes.
My only question for you is, do we have any data on how many people in Holliston have been vaccinated?
We do not.
We do not. Do we expect the state to release any of that kind of information?
That is an excellent question. I have not heard that on any of the conference calls. I know they're tracking total number of vaccinations administered because they need to report that up to the federal government, but I have not heard whether or not there plans to be a breakdown by zip code or region.
I think, I mean, it would be nice sort of to have that sort of, that metric as well as sort of some of the other metrics in terms of COVID to sort of understand, you know, how many folks in Holliston have been vaccinated. And another part of that question would be, is there some sort of a threshold to reach that things could get, that there would be any changes to restrictions or anything like that, or potential lifting of anything? I don't know. I'm just curious if we're aiming for something, and maybe is it statewide or is it, you know, community-based, based on how many vaccinations?
Yeah, the CDC guidance says that even if a majority of your population gets vaccinations from one or of the manufacturers who have gotten the emergency use authorization, we would still need to continue all of the mitigation measures that we have currently in place, at least through summer and or fall.
Okay.
So even if we had a supermajority of the population receive the vaccination, I wouldn't anticipate that there would be any ability to locally lift certain restrictions. And the other thing to remember is that the current vaccines that have received the EUA are not approved for pediatric patients, and therefore there's a considerable subsection of our population that is not eligible right now to get the vaccination.
Okay. My story last week about my wife trying to get Beatles tickets to get my grandmother vaccinated. She did get vaccinated.
Excellent.
So she got her first phase last week.
Pfizer or Moderna?
I'm not entirely sure. I would have to ask my uncle who transported her. So, but that's all I have. Thank you very much, as always, for the in-depth information.
Sweet.
I don't have any questions, but I'll share a little personal story. A friend that I graduated from Simmons University with is Vice President at Moderna. We were on a Zoom call, friends, you know, hanging out yesterday. They have done all of their programming and planning, not the research part, but the programming and planning by Zoom calls from their home. Truly remarkable. They started out a couple years ago as a company of 900, and here they are today producing this vaccine, again, with that executive level programming and planning being done by Zoom call, everyone working at home. Just remarkable. But I have no questions for you. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Tina. Just to Ben's point real quick, I believe there is tracking of individuals by address, so at some point DPH ought to have that information to share.
I know it's being entered into the MIIS. I'm just not sure if it's gonna roll up.
And if it will be outward facing, right? If I can ask, Chris to go backwards on your PowerPoint, there were a couple of slides, including the phased, periods of time for the different groups. I just had a couple questions on that. So currently, you mentioned, Mike, we're underway with phase 2, individuals aged 75 years of age or older.
Yes.
We'll move forward with, the remaining phases. Are there timeframes, associated with each of the subsets of the phase and then ultimately to phase 3 that you can share?
So they don't know exactly when they're going to transition to individuals 65 and older and individuals with 2 or comorbidities, or to the K-12 and the other sectors. It will be sometime either late February or early March, probably, when they get to the individuals 65 and older and individuals with 2 or more comorbidities. It's kind of up in the air right now how early the educators are going to be able to get it. A lot is going to depend on how much of the current allotment from the federal government is actually made available to the state, which will allow them to continue to push through the priority groups within phase 2.
If you happen to know, it's okay if you don't, but a little bit of a deep question. If you were eligible for phase 1 and early phase 2, and you declined the opportunity for vaccination, and then you change your mind, you want to re-enter the queue, how are they handling that request? Do you now have to wait till the very end?
So you are,
Go right back in?
as long as you are eligible, the online scheduling portals are now making you answer the eligibility questions at the beginning. So as long as you meet the criteria of either phase 1 or whatever phase in 2 is allowed to do it, you can schedule.
Great. Chris, if you go to the 2-on-1 call page, perhaps we'll hear from Linda in a few minutes, because I know the Council on Aging has been working a lot towards this particular item. But the question is, if you're an elderly individual and you're not comfortable making the call, you may have some issues with making a phone call, can a proxy make it for you?
Yes.
Are there any guidelines to that?
So they would need to have a lot of information at their, right in front of them when they were making the call. So it almost might be either a conference call between the 75 and older individual and the call taker that would be routed through 2-on-1. Because they're going to be asking not only the eligibility questions, but they're also going to be asking insurance information as well as health history questions.
Got it. Chris, now I think we're going backwards a bit, forgive me, but I'm looking for the screen that Mike had up relative to the local Board of Health test of whether or not we could have our own site. Mike, you went through this with us and explained that our community is not positioned for a local vaccine location. You described briefly some of the challenges associated with it. But not that I want to go too deep into this question, but I want to understand broadly, is our Board of Health position going forward? What's the scalable issue that's keeping Holliston from being a participant in this kind of a program? Is it resources, people, money, facilities? You and I have talked, so I understand some of the factors, but through you and through Travis, I'd like to create a message for our Board of Health, which is a separate elected board, to consider revisiting the needs of our community and possibly looking for resources for the future to help our citizens have local access to health care like this. You mentioned the flu clinic had to be canceled for similar reasons. That's a recurring thing. So if you want to speak to that to the best of your ability, let us know where are we coming up short and can we resolve this, and if so, how?
So a couple factors. First of all, just as we were challenged when trying to brainstorm where we could have our special town meeting in the fall/winter, and there are limitations to what facilities in town would be able to host us, because that could then impact their subsequent programming if we didn't have the ability to do a quick turnaround and do a deep clean. Right now, location is one of the challenges that we face, because you would need to have an accessible building, you would need to have adequate parking, you would need to have the ability to have individuals who have been vaccinated, who need to be monitored, waiting before they can leave. So you need a large capacity room or a series of rooms. So that does impact staffing in terms of who would be able to administer the shots. The storage and handling, again, that's going to depend a lot on what happens with additional emergency use authorizations. Obviously, we don't have the capacity to store the Pfizer vaccine. We do have the capacity to store the Moderna vaccine, and we would definitely have the capacity to store the J&J vaccine if that gets approved by the FDA on the 26th of this month. And that also has a longer shelf life, as it were, and also requires only one shot. As I understand it, from having listened to some of the conversations from the Board of Health during their public meetings last fall, a lot of it has to do with the MIS and the requirement, and this recently was updated. It used to be that you had 72 hours from the time that the shot was administered to enter in the information into the state system. And because of the reporting requirements to the federal government, making sure that they know exactly where all the shots are, how many of them have been administered, what is being spoiled, so to say, and who still has capacity for the subsequent week, they've moved that requirement up to 24 hours. And so as you may recall, the Board of Health had already requested additional hours for some of their clerical help, and part of the issue was they felt that they didn't have the ability to do all of their normal health department work in addition to COVID-related activities. And so there are only certain individuals which can enter the information into MIS. It's not like we could just hire a part-time employee and ask them to enter the MIS. They would need to, if we were to hire temp workers, they would need to relieve some of the other Board of Health functions in terms of the public-facing and the clerical duties. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's a resource issue, and it's a capacity issue.
The town of Holliston has an emergency management plan. I believe you drafted it.
Yes.
About 6 months ago. You said there'll be a lot to learn, a lot to talk about when this pandemic is done in terms of an after action and areas to improve upon.
Yes.
I'm guessing our current emergency management plan never envisioned this kind of pandemic and the impact it would have on the community.
Our plan did have an annex for mass vaccinations, and they do have pod distribution plans for use of the elementary school to be able to do a large-scale inoculation of the public, but it never envisioned that that would be concurrent with when those schools would be closed to the public. So that was not a contingency that any of the planning assumptions ever considered, was that the buildings would try to still be used for educational purposes, and therefore to maximize the utilization for curriculum delivery, that they would be closed to the public.
So we can envision some kind of evolution of that model going forward. And when you do that type of thing, you usually collaborate with other town departments. In this case, it would be BOH.
Yeah.
Okay.
And schools, obviously.
Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
2 questions. So you talked about capacity in providing the vaccine if we were to do, if the town were to do something like that. The drive-by doesn't work?
So the drive-by, you still need to have a mechanism by which you're observing people for 15 to 20 minutes before you let them drive away, or let their driver drive them away.
And the MIS limitation, that there's no reasonable ability to share with another community, so that there's a staff member shared between multiple communities who comes to one town on Saturday, Sunday, where they run their vaccine clinic, and then the next week goes somewhere else.
Right, the credentials would need to be for the community in which the administration was taking place. So if we were part of a regional vaccination effort, which is something that a lot of communities are doing, and we're certainly open to that and continue to explore throughout our network that capability, whoever the host community is, they're the ones that are responsible for entering all of that information into the computer. So even if a Holliston person went to a regional site in Natick, it would be Natick who would be entering that into MIS.
Good. Any questions from the Zoom call on the coronavirus community update?
Do you want to have Linda speak at this portion or the CARES portion?
Either one at this point. Linda, are you with us?
I am.
Marshall?
I am.
How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. We're gonna bring you into the coronavirus, community update portion of this evening's meeting, if that's okay. I know you have some things to report for the community of Holliston and, what the Council on Aging has been up to. So, if you'd like, the floor is yours.
Okay, so tomorrow morning, we have a training scheduled for the volunteers who have offered to assist people to register online. We are particularly looking at those that will need transportation and staying in part of our group. Today, I did refer two seniors to the 211 number who were capable of doing that. And both of them called me back to say that they were on hold way too long and they weren't gonna wait anymore. I know one was an hour and a half. I don't know how long the other person waited, so they're gonna try it another day. So they're remaining on our list right now as well. And Chief Cassidy, in your messaging, I'm wondering if you can also begin to start sharing that even if somebody is vaccinated, that they still need to wear a mask at this time? Because we are hearing from, we're hearing from some of our folks, yes. That think that once they're vaccinated, they won't need to anymore. So we have sent out a soft rollout from the center in terms of seeing how many people, how many over 75 would need assistance with a vaccine. We've probably reached out to about 25% of the 75 and older population. And of those, we have 45 to 50 that have requested assistance with registering, and about 25 of those also looking at transportation. Some of that number may drop, as I know some of them live in senior housing, and the Framingham Housing Authority is also working on getting those folks vaccinated. So it may come down to who's got a plan in place first. And Chief, I'm going to ask you if you can do a Blackboard call at this point, now that I'll have volunteers on tomorrow, so that we can try to get the message out to the rest of the community that we are one of the options available to help people to register that don't have access or somebody to help them.
Absolutely, yeah, I was waiting to send that until we knew that you had your phone bank ready with your volunteers already trained.
If the snow doesn't scare them away tomorrow, I hope to have them ready, even if it means that we take somebody's name and number and call them back, which is how we've been managing the other people.
Anything else, Linda?
I think that's the highlights.
Okay, I think you have something coming up in the next portion of Mike's presentation, so don't go too far.
I do.
Let us move on to the CARES Act programmatic update, Mike, if you could weigh in, please.
Absolutely. So, the long-awaited update of where we are in terms of our spending. We have been able to reconcile with our friends from the schools and make sure that we know exactly which expenses are charged to which set of CARES funds. And so this is an accurate picture through today. This is a table format, and then on the next slide, I know some of you are more visual, so this breaks it down by category just to show what our relative spending is. So it does not include any of the school expenses. This is just what is being charged to the municipal CARES funds, the $1.3 million that was received back in June.
Even some of the planning and development school related?
Yes, so the majority of the gray bottom right-hand corner, 174 to 114, that was technology for the schools, but it was technology that the board had agreed in their original application to Administration and Finance that they would support those expenditures. So, with that snapshot, that's a good segue into, I have two requests for you this evening. The first one is coming to us from our IT department. As the different departments and town staff have been working with the senior center and with their director and their personnel, trying to create the capacity for them to do a more local and personal alternative to the 211 system. 211 is fine if they can get themselves to a location, but one of the benefits of a volunteer at the senior center taking the call is it's likely someone that they're going to trust because it's someone that they know, and it's a local number, and therefore they have a greater degree of confidence. But secondarily, as Linda had indicated a few moments ago, they are not only helping with appointments for those who can't access the internet site, but also are figuring out where there is a transportation gap. The challenge that they're finding is that they do not have the capacity in terms of bandwidth at the senior center, and so the technology director has reached out to our existing provider to see if they could enhance our service. Unfortunately, they were not able to offer an economical solution, and therefore he has a different vendor who, if the board approves this expenditure tonight, is prepared to make the upgrade tomorrow, which would be just in time for the volunteers that are going to be trained tomorrow. And this was really thanks to the community liaison from that vendor. And I know Chris would express his thanks to her for her efforts, because the sales department said that they could be there on the 26th, but she was able to coordinate it so that if you approve this request tonight, they can be there tomorrow to make the upgrade. So that's the first request that I have, which is $717, which is a one-time expenditure, which includes a modem installation in the first month, and then $280 for the remaining 4 months of enhanced service, at which point the expectation would be that they would be able to build in the increased costs into the COA budget.
Any questions, Ben?
You just answered it, so I'm good.
Tina?
None.
I'll entertain a motion to approve a CARES Act programmatic upgrade for the Council on Aging totaling $717 for enhanced internet connectivity.
So moved.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Great, thank you. And the second one would be a request for an authorization not to exceed $15,000. And again, as Linda and her volunteers are talking to individuals that they serve and figuring out who has a transportation gap, they have been very creative trying to find out the best way to offer transportation services to those that need it. Obviously, it would be more expensive if they need to provide transportation to and from Gillette. It would be much more expensive, much less expensive, if they're sending people to Hopkinton or to Milford, yes, thank you. But worst case scenario, if we had 100 people in the 75 and older age who needed round trip transportation and someone who will wait for them to and from Gillette, we're thinking $15,000 would be a reasonable expense. We do have a vendor who's willing to bill the town, which is good, because there are programmatic requirements of FEMA for it to be 100% eligible, and that needs to be that it was invoiced and not just giving out gift cards for Amex or Uber gift cards and telling someone you're on your own, get it. So also, in terms of the 100% eligibility for FEMA reimbursement, it needs to be not normal scheduled hours. So if we were to be using the transportation services of the senior center, those would only be reimbursable expenses once their driver was on overtime. So if they're on their straight regular shift, that is not reimbursable. It's only the overtime expenses that would be eligible. So, but if we outsource it to a vendor who is insured and licensed and willing to take them there, wait, and then drive them back, and they're willing to bill us on a monthly basis, that will be based on the new rules that went into effect on January 21st and are in effect until September 30th, would be 100% FEMA eligible for reimbursement.
Before we get to questions on this, I just want to give Linda a chance to either promote and or fill in any gaps on the program side. The transportation request. Linda, do you have anything to add from what Chief Cassidy has offered us this evening?
I do, but first I actually have a question for Chief. So for our regular drivers, even if they not overtime, but above what our normal hours are, would that be not reimbursable?
If it was beyond their normal schedule, their straight time would be eligible. It's just If it's their regular schedule, it's not reimbursable, but if they're scheduled for 20 hours a week and they did hours 21 through 30, those additional 10 hours would be eligible.
Okay, so, because my drivers are sliding scale, but I only have funding right now for a total of about 50 hours per week spread across my drivers. So with over
Yeah,
50,
the reimbursable part would be beyond your normal budgeted amount, as long as
okay.
it was related to the transportation to and from a vaccine administration site.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. So yes, we are looking at that. I reached out to a taxi provider who has provided some service to, first of all, a number of seniors, as well as has worked with me a few times in the past. They have a history of being extremely reliable, and they're willing to have the taxis wait for the person, which is huge. So that means the senior doesn't have to figure out how to get their ride back once they get to whatever location they go to. And we were looking to use that for rides that we are not able to provide ourselves. Currently, we are at this point down to one full-time and two part-time drivers who are able to work. And I have a posting actually looking for one additional part-time driver, just to help fill the gaps, because we're still doing all of our regular rides in addition to what we'll try to pick up with this. We also, of course, with our buses have the ability, we're handicap accessible. So we have the ramp, the lift, I should say. So we can also help folks that would not be able to go by taxi, and we will schedule those. I know there's a few of our folks that might qualify for needing a lift, or have expressed difficulty at least getting in and out of a car.
All right, anything else, Linda, on the programmatic side before we have any questions from the select board?
I don't think so.
Okay, Ben, any questions?
Just the only thing, just two comments. The first is it's great that we have this program. I really appreciate you doing this, Linda and Chief, putting this together. And the other comment is making sure that, you know, which goes without saying, that we're keeping an eye to make sure that this is sufficient, and that if we need to increase the funding, that we do so as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. What I envision is that if this model works for this discrete population and the need is still there for subsequent priority groups, that we would come back just like we did for a second round of rent mortgage relief, that we could come back and look for additional transportation costs subsequently.
Fantastic. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, so that's one of my questions. So this 15,000 is to service 75-year-old and older.
Correct.
All right, so if we're going to then embrace the next category within that phase 2, we would have to come back to another CARES request for additional transportation services.
And just like we did with rent mortgage, we would offer you a report on how many we were able to help with this, what the average costs were, and the distances traveled. I'm sure we would get very detailed reporting from the vendor who is willing to take the license.
Okay, and then is it just the individual going for the vaccine? Are they able to bring a family member for support, for assistance if needed? Are there any terms the transportation company's putting on the COA or the town for who's allowed in the car, how that's all going to work? Are there any restrictions we should know about?
Just the capacity of their vehicle.
Yeah. All right, and then what's the time frame? So 75 plus, do we have like a start, end? Are we thinking a month? Are we thinking until the 15,000 runs out? Like, how does this
So the 15,000 was worst case scenario, thinking that it was a round trip to Gillette for 100 individuals.
Okay.
Again, if people are able to get appointments in Milford or Hopkinton, it would go farther.
Yes.
And in terms of when it could start, it would be as soon as their volunteers can get appointments for people and they can line up. And the taxi company that Linda has lined up has a deep well of in their fleet to be able to serve the needs appropriately.
So there's no hard end date? Okay. And then, these taxis will also offer accessible vans, any taxi service, I would imagine that we're looking at has that ability as well as the senior center, okay.
Actually, this one does not.
Okay. Okay, but your call center, when you set up your phone bank tomorrow, they'll be able to identify whether or not they're gonna have to go by COA van versus this transportation service?
Correct.
All right,
Excellent.
And then last question would be whether or not there's going to be a feedback loop for the residents who are using this service to say, was it reliable, was it what I expected, did I have any problems? Does that mechanism exist so that if we're halfway through this and we're seeing, I doubt it, but, you know, is there a way to say, to get that kind of feedback, to say we're getting this level of service we expected and it's reliable?
The fact that they've already used this vendor before with positive results, I'm confident that the clientele would share both good and bad with Linda and her volunteers.
Yeah, I guess my question is just, is there a mechanism by which we can get that feedback?
They share very openly.
Okay. So, yeah. That's it, thank you.
Question, I think through you, Travis, regarding the waiver. We had discussed the transportation issue as being a bit of a conundrum a week or so ago. It now appears as though we have a solution within reach using this service that Linda's identified. Does this board need to endorse or sign off on any waiver of liability associated with that, or do the individuals do it?
No, so because it's a licensed vendor, there isn't that issue. The waiver that we had been discussing was if we needed to rely on volunteer service, driving individual cars through, you know, organization through the COA, that we were going to need to come up and get creative and use some of the liability waivers that have been put forth by the state and federal government. Council was not excited about that idea. I think, you know, certainly if I hear from Linda that we're running through our other possibilities and we're going to need to rely on that, I think we can certainly go that route. I think at this point it would probably be our last line of defense, especially so some of the other things that Linda's group had looked at, right? Uber, Lyft do have a new service. It's called GoGo Grandparent, I believe. So they kicked the tires on that to see sort of what was available through that. I think at this point, you know, the fleet that we have at our disposal right now, backed up by this taxi service, you know, the second and third lines of defense after that were really what we were doing our due diligence on.
Very well. Any questions on the CARES Act programmatic update? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve up to $15,000 for transportation services for 75 and older, relative to the Council on Aging program.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Mike, thanks so much for your work.
Thank you very much.
Linda, thank you, appreciate it.
You're welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll see Linda shortly on her budget.
Yes.
I'm gonna knock out a couple of things before we get to the stipend committee. Do you have any warrants, Ben?
We do, there's one warrant. I will make a motion to approve a warrant in the amount of $549,024.02. Of that, $176,558.40 is town payroll.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries. Is that it, Ben?
Yep, for one.
All right. Is there signing? Public comments. Anything, Ben?
I do not have any public comment this evening.
I do not, nope.
And, I do not. Anything on the Zoom call for public comment this evening? Thanks, Ben. Hearing none, we will now be joined by our friends on the stipend committee. I believe the chairwoman is Joan Shaughnessy. Joan is with us. Hello, Joan, how are you this evening?
I'm well. How are you?
We're doing pretty good, thanks. Great to see you, and I think I see members of your committee. If you'd like to take a few minutes to introduce them or have them introduce themselves, that would be great.
I would. So the members of most of us are here. Shelley Bachner, Daniel Wynot, Tom Dumas, and we are missing Mrs. Erica Plunkett, she's on another town-related Zoom, and she'll be over in probably right as we're wrapping up. I sent to you over the weekend a draft of our memorandum, and just before this, jumping on this call, I sent you the final memorandum from the stipend committee to the select board, and it differed in some punctuation. So if you had the opportunity to read it this weekend, then I wouldn't bother you with the final that was just sent to you. So should I just give you the quick overview and then open it up for questions so anybody watching knows what we're talking about?
I think that'd be great.
Okay, great. I'm pretty good at being brief, so let's go. So the stipend committee was formed over the summer to answer the question of whether the use of stipends or other remuneration would affect the level of volunteerism in town, and also to look at the future use of stipends. The committee we researched publicly available documents, we went on websites, we combed through warrants, we conducted surveys of town administrators, and we conducted a few interviews. And we used the peer universe that the governance committee used, and their criteria is outlined in their minutes, which is linked in our memo, which we will make publicly available, of course. And we added 3 more. We added Hopkinton, Medfield, and Hanover. We added those are 3 that 2 of us are former school committee members, and those are communities that we often use for comparison. So we thought it wouldn't hurt to add 3 more. So there's a total of 18 towns. We found that just over half of the towns in this peer universe offer stipends. 80% of them offer them to the select board and 70% to the Board of Assessors. The stipend amounts vary quite a bit. And the functions of their boards of assessors and their select boards also vary. In Holliston, our select board is very visible in what our select board does. What is not visible is the knowledge that they need to gain behind the scenes vis-a-vis mass general laws, mass regs, the town charter, and on and on and on. I'm sure Kevin Conley could write a book on the subject of what the curve that our select board has to come up. But 2, I learned a lot about assessing. And the one thing I learned is that I don't want to be an assessor. It's very technical. And the state outlines rubrics and standards that some boards of assessors follow. We have a group in Holliston who take a painstaking process to not fit Holliston into a rubric, and it is particularly germane as it comes to the seniors in town, because the state standards rely on a parcel of property without considering that a small property could have a big house on it, and vice versa. And some of our older properties in town, many of which are inhabited by our senior population. Senior population is defined, by the way, as 55 and over, so I'll be there pretty soon. But the state standards would really penalize those residents in town that have been here for quite a while. And so our Board of Assessors really digs down, and they even do site visits, and they go through a very time-consuming process, as do all of our boards. We don't have a lot of rubber stamp boards in Holliston. We have people who care deeply about our town, and people who spend hours and hours of their time and intellectual capital in the name of service to Holliston. And given that the functions of these boards vary from town to town and based on tradition and culture, we really didn't have a lot to go on to differentiate, why do some offer stipends and some don't? We found it was very subjective. It was very qualitative. It was based on history and culture. The one thing we did find is that something that is unique to the Board of Assessors is they have to take a week-long training to be certified in assessing. This week-long must be done at UMass Amherst. It's a prescribed week. It is not flexible. And you must go stay at UMass. And I understand it's a lot more comfortable than when I went there many, many years ago. But still, that is quite a sacrifice. That's a week away from work, or you have to give up a week vacation. And so we thought if one was looking to substantiate a stipend for the Board of Assessors, this week could be used because no other board that we found is required to do this manner of training where you have to go somewhere, stay there for a week. And so we said, well, if you were going to calculate what the remuneration would be for that week in terms of compensation. So I, being the data lady that I am, with the support of our committee, we took the median family income of the last published census, which was 1999, and we used the CPI inflation calculator from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we took that number, and the median income was somewhere around 130 some odd, and divide by 52 for a weekly sum, and that came to $25.26, and the current stipend is $2,500. So what we found in general is that it's a very difficult question to answer, and it cannot be answered by relying on statistics or diving deep into the data. Every town struggles with volunteers from time to time. The assessor is this board of assessors is a particularly difficult post to fill because it is very technical. It's, if you're not into that kind of thing, it could be very arduous and time consuming. And the way that Holliston approaches assessing is far more technical and time consuming than for many of our peers. So where the stipend committee comes out, and I would really welcome other members of the committee to jump in and add what I'm sure is plenty that I missed, is that we believe it's a cultural thing, it's a historical thing, and if we had to, put a gun to our head, what would you do? We believe that the Board of Assessors is entitled to some remuneration based on that week. And that is any other stipends that would be offered or not offered. And this stipend is a subject for town meeting. So Dan, Shelley, Tom, anything, what did I miss?
You're good.
You nailed it, Joan.
Okay, thanks.
Good job.
Joan, are you ready?
Thanks, Tom.
Are you ready for some questions?
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll start with Ben.
Well, thank you very much, Joan. It's nice to see some of your technical issues. The last time you were here, I think you were pink because of your computer camera was doing something funky. So it's good to see.
Yeah, I bought a ring light.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
that
$20 on Amazon.
Nice. This is great. I like how you did this analysis. You gave us some good information on what other towns are doing. I really only have one particular question because based on what you've got here, I think is very effective and answers a lot of the questions that we might have. But my question for you and for the committee, I guess, would be is if we're putting the assessor's stipend based on median family income, is that something we should be revisiting like every couple of years? Because if we're going to use that metric as the mechanism for, I don't want to say justifying, but certainly enumerating how much that stipend should be, would it make sense that we revisit it like every, say, 5 years or so to sort of recalculate it to make sure it stays current?
It does make sense. And actually, I think I outlined the data in the memo of the difference, like the delta between 1999 and December of 1999 versus December of 2020. It was significant. It went from like 80-something thousand to 130. So I don't know, a 5-year audit or whatever, people who are more versed in statistical analysis I would rely on that, but that does make sense.
Okay. So I think that would just be something that I think we should, if that's the route we want to take, we would want to tie it to something and then just sort of put into any long-term analysis that we would revisit those numbers regularly. But I guess that would be up to the assessors to do so. So that's all I have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. I mean, I appreciate the honesty in your conclusion statements. I think that you guys are humble in how you presented the information, and I don't think that it's a subjective endorsement at all. I think you guys have done a really deep dive. I understand what you're saying about not being a data-driven conclusion that you're making, but I still think you've definitely done the research to support the suggestion, the recommendation that you do make. My only question, so thank you for that. My only question is whether or not your committee, and this is perhaps for my board, is whether or not you would do a presentation at town meeting. So I believe I see a recommendation that town meeting should be presented with the Board of Assessors stipend for consideration. Is that something that this committee would present, or it would be in the regular budget discussions that we do every year at town meeting? Like, does anything change?
Would be that it would be presented through the budget, because now I believe we have a separate article. Unlike in past years, I think in July we did it for the first time, calling out stipends as a separate article.
Yeah.
So the town has a deliberate and very overt opportunity to see the stipends that Joan's talking about and to have a conclusive vote on them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then I guess what we might do is come back to the members of the stipend committee around annual town meeting and ask for them to potentially answer any questions if they did come up. But no, I have no other questions.
Just give me notice so I can make sure my hair is colored.
Right, yes.
Are you all set? All right. First of all, please accept my most sincere thanks to each member of your committee, Joan. Whenever we pull together citizens, we ask them to work on these subcommittees. It's life interrupted. We know we're asking you to work on something with a relatively quick turnaround, and we appreciate the feedback. I know you folks did a lot of work doing some surveys and research for other communities on a rather slippery issue. The results were not overly surprising to me. I think I always knew that other communities had stipends, but you've provided empirical basis for what those are. We're not an island anymore. We do seem to have some relevance to other communities. So without much fanfare, I will accept this report and just say, you know, it confirms my expectations of where we were. And I really like your conclusion that any such stipends going forward ought to be voted overtly by the town at its annual town meeting. I think that's where it needs to be. And last year, I think one of the reasons we brought this committee together was because there was some communication between committees about whether or not the stipend had a place in our business, if you will, our budget. Now we've got some evidence to suggest there is some relevance to other communities. And publicly, we should have a conversation about it each year. I will ask any member of the public assembled this evening if they've got questions for the stipend committee on this matter. If you do, raise your hand, you'll be recognized.
I think I see some members of the of the assessors on the call.
Chris is shaking his head. Nobody's raised their hand. So you know what? We're going to accept your report at this point. We will not dissolve your committee because, as Tina mentioned, there may be a need coming up in a few months for annual town meeting. But we want to thank you very much, sincerely, for all your work and your time pulling this off. We very much appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to an update from the Blair Square Committee. I understand former Selectman Kevin Conley's with us this evening, who is chairing that committee. Hi, Kevin. How are you tonight?
Good evening. Thank you for having us, people. Appreciate it.
Kevin,
you ready?
We understand. Yes, I think your committee has some updates to share with us, and we're all ears, so we'll give you the floor to get going.
All right. On February 2001, this is the Blair Square Committee. We're not having a meeting tonight, but there are members logged into the computer. We're going to review it first. On August 28th, 2017, from the Board of Select, the objective is to provide a vision of the Blair Square area for the town's consideration and potential redevelopment and reuse. And then the Blair Square Committee profile charge on October 24th, 2017, the mission was the Holliston Blair Square Committee is to evaluate and recommend the best long-term use of Blair Square from Church to Exchange Street. The objective is to provide a vision of the Blair Square area, the town's consideration and potential redevelopment and reuse. The Blair Square Committee has agreed upon that we have a vision for the Blair Square site. The committee, Walter McGrath, Gretchen Rice, Eric Woodhouse, Herb Brockett, Martha Ellis, Peter Barbieri, Shaw Lively, Kevin Conley, with liaison Ben Sparrow, with assistance from Regan Harold and Inga Daniels, has voted on and confirmed the vision in the potential redevelopment use. You got the handout. The use is that the area should be made into a public park and look something like the following. And there was a diagram that was shown at the meeting we had last week, and I hope you all have copies of that. There it is. This will include a shift/bump of the rail trail to the right as you enter from Central Street and grading down to Front Street. Inside that area will be a bricked portion near the entrance, and after that, a grass area with tiers to the right for seating and an area to the left for a fanned out structure. Beyond that, to the left, a small platform to be occupied occasionally by porta potties ordered in by a particular event or season. No, it's just a platform. Somebody wants to get a porta potty in, get it in. When they're done, it's out. There will be a flagpole off to the right as you enter. There will be electrical and water provided to the needed areas. There will be an access way that currently stands there to remain for access to the site. So we want visual sightings as you drive around. If a police officer had to drive around the whole block, they could always look into the site and see what's going on. We don't want any blocked sightings of the space. We envision all types of events to be held here, including but not limited to farmers market, movie night, exercise classes, educational classes, and so many more possibilities for the community to enjoy a way into the future. It will be like a town common. It should also help businesses in the area. We foresee the parking on Front Street to mirror that of Casey's side. They'll be relatively close to town parking behind the fire station. We envision the whole section to be clean and attractive area. Possibly the Veterans Memorial being down the left, just past the Vine Street entrance, in more secluded area for personal reflection. We have completed the mission, but still wish to continue the project. To do this, we will need your assistance. How are we going to pay for it? Question mark. The first step is construction documents. They may cost up to around $54,000. We tried for the CPC money, as you had advised us, and they said no, they do not fund construction documents. They may consider the funding of the project itself, though. Perhaps updating the committee's mission, and the updated Holliston Blair Square Committee is to take the long-term vision that they came up with and make it happen with reappointed members. In other words, you can reappoint us. Everyone re-signs up for the project, and maybe there's a new person who might want to get on. It'd be wonderful. And the task would include incorporating Front Street, including the parking with Blair Square and Winthrop Street, evaluating the land at the corner of Railroad Street and Exchange Street for additional parking as suggested by Robert Weidnick, issuing and assisting in choosing with the BOS the bid for the construction documents that meet our criteria, bidding the construction of Blair Square, looking for funding, be it the CPC or any other funding source, including asking Carolyn or Karen at the State House for assistance, choosing a contractor for the building of the new Blair Square with the Board of Select. Initially, start a committee for Blair Square once complete to assist the rec department. In other words, if we can start a committee, once this is all done, I'd like to start a committee to get it going, schedule some events, and then pass it over to the park department if they feel that they can maintain it, because it will be a town park. One of my personal goals is I would love to have movie night and show Casablanca. It's my favorite movie. We have brought it to the public and the people in a Zoom meeting in the town website and questionnaire, and they seem to be enthusiastically supportive towards it. We would like the Board of Select to sponsor an article in the spring town meeting to pay for the construction documents, and we will follow up with the survey results. Appreciate the assistance. Any questions?
I think we do, Kevin. First of all, thank you very much. Great introduction. We'll start with questions from, Ben.
So I've been kind of doing a lot of stuff with these folks, so I have a lot of, I've been thinking about and looking at Blair Square a lot. One thing I did want to say for the forum last week, I'd really want to call out the hard work of Inga Daniels. She put in a lot of these drawings and did a lot to run that particular meeting, so I really wanted to make sure that she has my gratitude, and I think for many others, she put a lot of work into making some beautiful design documents for us to look at. And also wanted to say, mention Shaw Lively, who ran the forum, and he did a great job, so I did want to make sure that he got credit for that too, in addition to Kevin's hard work at leading this group of folks and putting together some things. So I just have a couple things, and some of this is actually more conversations for the people to my right as opposed to the Blair Square Committee. I think, you know, I think we need to, the design I think is a beautiful one, but I think we have to expand it somewhat. We still have a little bit of time before town meeting, but I think we need to have any design to include some solutions for Front Street and Winthrop Street there. That the area, particularly the area in front of the Rail Trail Snack Shack. I think we can't really do Blair Square work without that particular piece, whether it's parking or whether it's expanding the park. And you don't really want to make those changes to those particular streets without making sure that they're working together with Blair Square. So I think it's something that we might need to, perhaps, I'm not sure how we do that, but I think we really need to make sure that we might have to change their charge slightly to make sure that they can do that in the next couple of weeks, because we really need to have, that recommendation I think needs to go, I think that they need to make a recommendation to include that, particularly in a design level, not just in a recommendation level. And I think the other things that I think we really need from the Blair Square Committee is we have to, you know, we talked about the potential cost of design documents, but I think what we really need to have is, because it looks like once we're hitting a threshold, or we're probably going to have to put this out to bid. So what we really need to have is to be able to put together what are the criteria and the scope of bid documents, so that way we can build a bid, so that way we can make sure we can put it out there, and we make sure that we get all the information and all of the things that we need for it. And then the last piece would be, what is the right amount to ask for? Is it the $54,000, or if we're making some of these changes, including Front Street, does that change the scope of it? So I think those are the other pieces that I think are particularly important. So it's like, I really, you know, that's more asking the committee for that, the Blair Square Committee for that particular information, the criteria for bid, the amount of a bid, and asking my colleagues to the right, what is, can we include a slight change in their charge to make sure that they can include Front Street in their recommendation. So that's all I have to say. So there wasn't really a question. There was a lot of rambling. So
Thank you, Ben.
thank you.
Good rambling.
Appreciate it.
Tina.
I do have one question as to where the $54,000 came from, as I'm assuming it's kind of a guesstimate, an estimate. That number strikes me. You know, I've been on the board 2 years. I've only seen that number once for something, something like this, and that was for 9 Green Street, which, you know, just in my own personal opinion, is a more complex, involved project design. And so town meeting in December approved around the same amount, $54,000 for that contract, for that bid. So I'm just wondering again where the $54K came from.
Kevin Conley, that was from Regan and Inga. They roughly came up with the construction documents of $50,000 to $54,000. And to tell you the truth, I'm not good at bidding documents like that. I've never done it before. I'm sure the town's done it plenty of times. And I'm hoping that when the bids come in, it will come in for substantially less money, but I wouldn't know until it comes in.
Okay, so you're asking this board to consider preparing an article for town meeting that would request $54,000, or you're just sort of putting that in as a placeholder, and the real question is, would the board support any article? I'm just trying to judge where your thinking is, so that if we're not on the same page, we can identify that.
Well, yeah, up to $54,000 would be the request. And without the Board of Select's approval, the committee is in, it will be doing nothing until there's some
Right.
financing available.
Yeah, I mean, my question again would be, what would the wording of the article be? Because I don't see an article getting to town meeting that says up to $54,000 without more detail. And I'm not hearing Kevin say that 54 is where it needs to be. In fact, I'm hearing him say that it's probably a lot less than 54. So what does that, and maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but what does that article say? I'm absolutely in favor of making a request of a town meeting. This project is fantastic, but I just want to make sure we get it right.
I think to Ben's point, from where I'm sitting, if I'm trying to put together an article and put out an RFP for the plan, right, I need to know the scope. That's the biggest thing to me. I think if the Blair Square Committee could say, this is the scope of what we want somebody to design, then I can get a quote in time for the select board to consider a warrant article.
Okay.
I think I've seen an iteration of that, from my understanding, because I've sort of, this was months ago, and Kevin can tell me if the information is still accurate. The 54 came off of a design that included a lot of information for Blair Square that I don't know personally if that's where the Blair Square Committee still is. If any of that has changed and the scope has changed, I would just need to know that, and then I can probably get you a number that would be reasonable. But again, to Ben's point earlier, it's the scope. What is the design actually covering? Is it everything that has been discussed to date through the Blair Square Committee, or is there a more narrow focus now? I know there have been I was obviously reading the Holliston Reporter's write-up on it, whether it comes to moving the trail, the Front Street, sort of interfacing with Front Street, those types of things. If we can write up a scope, I can get you a number, and then the select board could consider that for the warrant closes March 29th for the May 10th meeting.
We have a little bit of time to get that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have no objection. Go ahead, Kevin.
If you can redo the mission to include the Front Street and the space in front of the snack shack, which is not on there, and give us authority to suggest some parking on town property, I don't know how that's going to affect the scope of what we really did. But if you see the diagram, I mean, that's what we want to do. So now if we're going to add the parking in the triangle in front and perhaps down the side some more parking, I don't know how that's going to affect the bid process, or who's going to need to perhaps Karen Sherman can help on that. I don't know. It's going to be more complicated. It might require more money for the.
And to your point about it being a little more complicated, we heard at the forum that you had last week, the owner of the Rail Trail Snack Shop suggest a willingness to have a discussion with the town about a private-public partnership with that triangular space. And so who is that within the scope of this committee? Is that something that only this board rather, discusses? Like because that's critical to what you're saying, Kevin, about parking and including Front Street into this conversation. So in what direction? So I think that's a question. I have a couple more comments, and I'm sure as a board we can discuss that in a minute. Kevin, are you comfortable with the scope, the change in charge, including a wayfinding signage plan? Because in your summary document, you talk about benefiting all the businesses in the area. And I think one thing we know from previous studies and work done in the downtown area is directing people off of the trail to those businesses is key. So there was some mention of it last week, and I'm just wondering if the scope of this new charge could include a wayfinding signage plan.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then I'm also wondering, I hear parking in terms of Front Street and Winthrop Street. I'm wondering if that also could include additional green space. So you're looking at what is currently asphalt to convert that into green space. Is that something that your committee has thought about if we were to redo the charge?
Yes, and again, would have to know where the street starts, where the street ends, and how much we can take. What's the legal amount for a one-way street? And I think it's a Board of Select issue if they're going to make that a one-way street or not. because that could affect the width of the street.
And that's not a decision this board has made yet, and I wonder if we need to make that decision so that this committee could, with this expanded change charge, go in that direction to
I
do
think,
what we're asking them to do.
I think, I mean, you know, I think we've kind of, at least I wanted to wait to make those decisions from this board's perspective until we knew what the Blair Square Committee was doing. But I think we're kind of in that little like feedback loop where it's like, we gotta wait for us, but we gotta wait for them.
Right.
It's like, we need to kind of just say, look, this is, you know, they need to make a recommendation and then we have to vote on it. I think
Okay.
that's how it has to work.
Okay, all right, so I'm very curious to hear what you all have to say about this. And then last thing, on your plan, you have an alternate location for the Veterans Memorial. That does seem important because in either location, it's quite a bit of real estate. So how does that decision get made as to the final Veterans Memorial location?
Well, Walter McGrath and Herb Brockett came up with a spot. If you're walking down the trail, there's a left-hand turn that goes up to Vine Street. It's like a trail.
Yeah, I see it.
Just past that on the left, they want to put the memorial in that area. And it would fit fine because they want a more solemn place where they can, you know, have some remembrance and semi-private, as opposed to being right on the side of the street.
Do I understand you to say then that the final location will be this alternate location, or that's not quite decided yet?
It's 99 and 44 100 Shore.
Okay, that's pretty good. All right, thank you. Thanks, Kevin. I think that was a lot. Thanks for answering my questions.
And if anybody wants a tour down there, I can show point out different things.
Kevin, just a couple of questions for you. You mentioned during your presentation that you folks had a public listening session on February 3rd, and you received a lot of feedback from users and potential abutters of this area, correct?
Correct.
Do you have another planned event coming up in late February? So some other event then that was, I thought it was February 24th.
It's this when so there's a place where people can add public comments on the website, and that closes on February 24th.
So the committee effectively is virtually receiving feedback via citizens' interest.
Correct.
Kevin, one of the things I note on this drawing is the parking does seem to be an issue with respect to. Has your committee assessed how many parking spaces it needs to serve the needs of this renovated space? Does that come into your committee's thinking?
No, we haven't gone that far yet because we didn't have control of the street. Until we have that, we won't be able to tell.
Okay. I went back and I looked at some of the old minutes associated with your committee's work over the last couple of years. There was a fair amount of discussion off and on about possible public bathrooms. I cannot find that your committee took a vote on whether or not public bathrooms, i.e. structures, should be part of your program. I do observe that the plan has a portalet pad on here. So if you folks could talk about what kind of votes you had on the on the bathroom side of things, because I think prior boards are very interested in public bathrooms.
A couple of things. We talked about it quite a bit over the years, and there was talk of putting a caboose up there with public bathrooms, which means the caboose has to go in, which is a fairly large object. It has to be a male and female handicap accessible bathrooms in this facility. They didn't have to have ramping up and around the caboose and ramps going up to the caboose level. And we thought that would just be too huge and onerous. It would take over the space and would be a big maintenance headache down the road for the town. So that we voted unanimously at all members who were current at that meeting not to go that route. And later we discussed the porta potty platform, just to put it there. So if someone wanted to rent a unit and bring it down, and that was probably voted on 6 months ago. It might have been the meeting on Blur's Day, I'm not sure, but that was voted on a while ago. So we want the convenience of being able to put something there. And if the town decided they want a porta potty there for the entire summer, and if you decided that, you could look into that as well. Because I think the town already has porta potties down at a few places maybe in town. I'm not sure.
I think we have both structure and porto, depending upon what park
Yeah.
you're at. But Kevin, to be clear, on the bathroom side, it was a prior board, it was not this board, had discussed support for public bathrooms. And to be clear, despite that support from the select board, your subcommittee voted unanimously not to support it. Is that what you're saying?
Not to support full 100% facility for bathrooms. But they
Got
did support a platform for putting porta potties on. If the town wanted to put it on there longer than a particular event, they're more than welcome to.
Okay. I had one last question about the design relative to the Veterans Memorial. If the memorial location ends up being further down Front Street towards Vine, does that change the presentation of the design currently where it shows a Veterans Memorial? Will that still be a paved area? What does it become?
I'm not sure yet. It could become a grassy area, or we're also considering bricks where people can donate money and get their name or someone's name in remembrance and put it on a brick. But it's a small area. We do hope there's going to be a flagpole put in the area as you walk into the right. So it might be just some bricks around the flagpole.
Okay. Before I kind of summarize where I think things stand, I'm just going to ask anybody who's assembled on the Zoom call this evening for public input on the product that's brought forth by the Blair Square Committee. Are there any questions or feedback from anybody assembled tonight? That would be Walter McGrath. Good evening, Walter. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
No complaints. What's on your mind?
I'd just like to expand a little bit on the Veterans Memorial. The reason we decided to try to move it further down the trail, a little bit more quiet, and we also would be able to get a little bigger space. The area will be pretty much the same layout that we've seen in the past. We plan to maybe put some bricks around there, a couple of benches, some flagpoles, that kind of thing. But that's basically the reason. The only reason it hasn't been 100% approved is we were waiting for the public forum to see if there was any input from that. And then the committee was going to vote on the actual movement.
So if it goes there, Walter, you've just changed the Memorial Day parade route, right?
We'll probably just send a group down there to plate the wreath and then go back and join the parade again.
I'm trying to be funny here. I have no problem taking a left on Winthrop and a right on. Different view of the world. Thank you for the feedback. We appreciate it. Any other comments on the Zoom call this evening for the Blair Square Committee? Hearing none. Okay. Let me, if I could, with my colleagues, feel free to weigh in at this point, summarize, I think, 3 prongs associated with the committee's current status. Number 1 is the open issue about its current charge. Kevin was kind enough to read that when he started. We've learned in the last month or so that there's an interest in redefining the space in front of the rail trail snack shop, possibly designing it for more of an expanded footprint of the Blair Square property itself. We would have to expand the charge to the committee to start looking at that area as a component of their total scope. Do you have any concerns or thoughts on that?
Just as it's written here, I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead first.
No, that's something I really think that we should be doing. I think we need to expand their scope to get that recommendation.
All right, just so as it's written here from what Kevin prepared, it's to include parking on Front and Winthrop. I would like to see, personally, I would like to see added green space landscaping. So in addition to parking, also green space landscaping.
Maybe we could even just say like fair use of the space or something like that to include, not to include parking solutions and green space, something like that. So let's just.
Very well. So could I think because we're going to change the scope of an existing committee, let's take a motion to have Travis drafted for our next meeting, and that way we can then charge this committee with providing some more of a comprehensive feedback, possibly in time for a Springtown meeting.
I will make that motion to alter the Blair Square Committee charge incorporating Kevin Connolly's comments here and those comments of the board tonight. Yeah, so,
To include Front Street and,
well, there are a couple different comments here.
yeah.
Do you understand the charge? Very good.
Okay.
So you'll, that is a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So what you now have, Travis, now is the intention from the board to expand the scope of this committee to include the footprint in and around, the public footprint in and around the rail trail shop, excuse me, snack shop, for purposes that, enrich the environment, whether it's parking, park area, whatever, okay? The second piece is, Kevin, apparently your committee still has some work to do on the public feedback side. You've received some to date. It sounds like your committee's taken some votes on certain positions, but yet you will have additional feedback provided electronically. I would encourage you through Ben to make a report back to us. It can be electronic itself, or you can make another appointment to come see us before town meeting with all of that customer feedback. But I would think at this point, you folks have a little bit more work to do. And the final prong is money. With regard to the article for the design, I'm going to ask Travis to speak to this because once the design work starts, it will have to be managed by Town Hall. This will be a contract under our control, and I just want Travis to sort of express a little bit about how that dynamic might work if we prevail with an article at town meeting. Good, Travis.
So, again, you're just asking about the process leading to town meeting and then after as well?
Correct.
Okay, so, leading in, obviously, what we would need, for an RFP, and I think, again, some of this work had been done, at a previous iteration, and I'm not sure where we are at the moment, so just checking in, but, I would need to write up an RFP for what we're looking for from design engineering services, have that in a normal RFP process. We would put that on the website, we put it out on, goods and services, we would put it out on, combis, depending on the estimated price that we come to, and we would get quotes back for those services. We can also, if what we're looking for is a number in a relatively shorter time frame, we can also go out to a couple firms, just ask them for cost estimates that we can put together for a warrant article, and then bring that amount to town meeting. If we're unable to put an RFP out and get numbers back in time for March 29th, what we could do is go to a couple firms with the scope. Again, that's what I need is to be really defined as the scope. Get a couple firms to give us quotes on what that would look like. We would choose a number that we felt comfortable with, go to town meeting, get that approved, and then put out the RFP. I would then put together, in a normal RFP, what I would put together is a group that would look at potentially price bids and non-price bids. So you keep the price bid sealed. You look at, this gives you the opportunity to look at bids based on merit. They're actually proposals more than bids. You can look at the specifically non-price packets. So you put together the group, everybody rates them, come up with a rating metric. You choose the one that you like, and then you open the price bids. And if everything is sort of in line, that's something allowed under mass procurement laws that I think probably fits the description of what we're talking about here the best. But again, until I see the scope and really understand, that would be as I'm sitting here today listening, that would probably be my recommendation unless something changes.
Very good. One other piece of business, because we are a relatively new board compared to the past boards that have addressed the issue. Mr. Conley indicated that his subcommittee has taken a position on public bathroom, which is currently not shown on this drawing. I've had a public position in the past to support that type of structure. I want to ask this board, is this an interest that you have at this time to put into the design, or leave it out?
Leave it out.
Leave it out? Okay. So at this point, we'll go forward with the recommendation. I'm for the public bathrooms, by the way, so we won't take a vote on it. It's just consensus. I thought I saw some benefit to that down the road. But hearing that, Kevin, I think at this point, your committee just needs to stay in the loop, continue receiving the customer feedback, and then when it comes time, work with Ben and Travis to try to pull off a good scope for a Springtown meeting warrant article.
John, can I jump in
All
on
right.
one more thing?
1 second, go ahead, Tina.
The one-way situation, it would be of a benefit for the committee to have at least a,
I'm sorry, there was a sidebar conversation.
oh,
He's just checking, he's good.
on what?
He has no further comment.
Right,
Still
of
some
course,
business over here.
I jumped ahead of him again. How do you want to handle the decision on, because right now the one-way on front is temporary until April 1st.
Well, I think the committee should presume that there will be some continuity of the one-way for some time, until otherwise advised. And if there's any concern of reversing that action, what is the impact on the plan? Yeah, give them the flexibility to address both sides. But I would presume the one-way is probably perpetual.
Kevin Conley again. The one-way street would be awesome. It would give us more space for greenery and parking. So think about it hard. It sounds like a very awesome idea.
Very well, thanks, Kevin. Any other questions from those folks on the Zoom call tonight before we let you go? Hearing none, we will move on with our agenda. Thanks so much, Kevin, and your committee. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Budget review with Travis Ahern.
All right, so we will have the 5 we had scheduled tonight. We're going to move Youth and Family Services to March 1st, and so we will start with the Conservation Commission. We have Ryan Clapp on the line with us, and he can get going while I pull it up unless Chris has it.
All right. We waiting for Chris to, or for Travis or someone? Or can I get
pull
started?
it up, but you can go ahead, Ryan.
All right, good evening. So I'm Ryan Clapp, the conservation agent for the town. So for the FY22 budget, I guess it makes sense to just go line by line. So the salary lines, we're keeping that the same. I understand that's across the board where that's at right now. For professional services, I'm proposing a slight increase. Last year we were appropriated $1,050. I'm proposing an increase up to $1,200. This year has been a fairly busy year as far as development, as well as land acquisition as well, and that often requires the use of a town council. Hence why, as of 12/31/20, we've already expended just about the entire, a little bit more of the appropriated municipal budget for professional services. That's, it's not out of the question for looking at the trends of the previous years. Don't know what FY22 is going to hold, but so that's why I'm proposing a slight increase. This is just kind of where it's been in the past, up to 1,200 as opposed to the 1,050. And hopefully that's appropriate. For communications, I'm proposing to keep that as a flat rate. That's largely for, at a flat rate at 1,500. That's largely for the phone bills and for mailings. Oftentimes, well, for just about everything that the Conservation Commission issues, it has to be sent out either hand delivery or certified mail, so that that can spike those costs pretty high, especially over the past month or so. I've checked with Sharon, and that 332 that's been expended thus far has already jumped in the past month to about 550. So it's inconsistent, but I would anticipate 1,500 being about where we're going to be. So for office supplies and educational materials, last year we had eliminated the educational supplies line item and condensed that into the professional development line item, since it's fairly similar in scope. However, I do see that there was a $31 expense out of the educational supplies. I checked with Sharon, that was an error. That was supposed to go to the office supplies line item. So that puts the office supplies right about where it was appropriated last year. I just changed it to a round number at 100. And then proposing a zero request for educational supplies, as we eliminated that last year. Professional development, this number was determined with the cost of the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commission dues, as well as attendance at the semi-annual conferences for myself and 2 members of the commission. Those conferences are currently being held virtual, so we're still able to do those, hopefully in FY22, maybe in the fall, maybe in the spring. We can actually have them in person again. MACC did send out a memo several weeks ago saying they are not increasing the amount for dues, and they're not changing the price structure for the semi-annual conferences. So I'm proposing to keep that the same. I just made it a round number, $12.50 as opposed to $12.23. The revolving accounts, the wetlands protection revolving and the wetlands bylaw revolving, those are both used for anything related to administering or enforcing the Wetlands Protection Act or the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. So those have been dipped into, but those are largely intended as safety nets in the event that, excuse me, in the event of litigation. The Conservation Trust Fund is a donation-based fund, so it doesn't largely change. Expenses are for land maintenance, for acquisition, and so we've spent about $8,000 out of that this year. As far as risks, as mentioned, the only real risk that we have is the same one as most land use departments have, and that's for litigation. So that's a very general overview. If anyone has any questions, be happy to take them.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. We'll start with Ben Sparrow for any questions.
Yes, so I appreciate all the work that you put into this. You actually answered a couple of my questions as I was going along, as you were giving your presentation, so I appreciate that, anticipating my my asks. So the question I have, I just want to go back to 53,000 professional services. So you're saying that the $1,200 you're requesting in FY22 is mostly for, you're using most of that for litigation, is that correct, or for town council?
Yeah, it's used largely for town council, whether we need him to weigh in on a land use acquisition, developing a quitclaim deed, something like that.
So the quitclaim deed, so those are some of the costs, and we went through this with planning too, is when we're sending, documents to and from court, right, there's still charges that are outside of the flat fee. I think the risk that Ryan sort of detailed when it comes to litigation is we're more protected in this budget.
So this is just kind of like some fees that come in there that are beyond, beyond. Okay, that was kind of my question, is like I said, was it covered under our budget already with our agreement with council?
So there are still some charges that we have outside of that.
Okay. I think my only comment further about that, I appreciate that clarification. That makes a lot of sense now. I just am a little concerned that, is 1,200 enough for that line? Because it looks like your run rate has been generally higher. 2020 was a little lower, but we could have probably seen that maybe just because of the pandemic and things like that, but you were as high as $2,000. And I just want to make sure that $1,200 isn't just sort of trying to keep the budget in line and is actually the right number. I want to make sure that if you need a little bit more, that you get the money you need to meet the needs of your the department.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a lower estimate. I was trying to keep, the costs down in this proposal. I mean, if we're looking at appropriated fiscal year or expended fiscal year 2020, just lost it. Oh, there we go. 1,147 the year before that, 1,426, 2066 before that. So it does vary. In keeping in line with trying to reduce costs due to COVID budget restraints, I am trying to keep that low.
Do you have the protection of the revolving fund, right, Ryan?
I'm sorry?
You do have the protection of the revolving fund for that as well?
We do, yeah. And so I intend on kind of pulling more out of that for the rest of this fiscal year.
Okay.
You have a revolving fund and the trust fund. You could use either one, right?
Correct. I try to avoid using those funds to the best of my ability, though, just because those are intended as a safety net. And as I mentioned about the Conservation Trust Fund, that's completely donation based. So there's not a lot of income that comes there.
You're doing well, though. I mean, it's got a good
spend
balance
out of
in
that
your fund.
is the gain.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess just philosophically, generally, I mean, I appreciate you trying to cut costs, but I also want to make sure that you get the right amount that you need to meet the department. And I'd rather see you ask for $500. I mean, when we're talking a couple $100, if it's, $30,000 is a different story. But you're asking, I mean, adding a few $100 to me to meet your needs, to make sure that you have enough in your budget seems completely reasonable. But I might be completely an island on that particular idea. So thank you very much. That's all I have. So I appreciate your time.
Tina.
Ryan, I just have one question. You mentioned both under the 53,000 professional services line item, and then as you were talking about the Conservation Trust Fund, that there's been some activity there with land acquisition in FY21. Do you prepare a report for town meeting? Will you discuss that in that report?
I do put that in the report for town meeting.
Okay, so the 8,000 that was spent out of the Conservation Trust Funds will be described, like what land we acquired and where it is and all that?
Yeah. And then it's not just for land acquisition, it's also for land maintenance as well. We did have to take down several trees along Kim Place earlier, or in the fall of 2020, as they were heavily damaged by emerald ash borer. And so we were trying to stem the tide of that invasive insect spreading to further ones on the conservation properties.
Okay,
So
I have no other questions.
It came out of there.
Thank you. Okay, yep, thank you.
I have no questions. I kind of got my points in regarding the revolving fund of the trust fund. So let me ask if there's any questions on the Zoom call today relative to the Conservation Commission budget for FY22. Hearing none, I will look for a motion to approve the FY22 requested budget of $54,509 for the Conservation Commission.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Ryan, thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Metro West Veterans, Mr. Ahern.
Pulling that up right now. All right. Pull this here. So Sarah Bateman is our agent. She does a very good job. I sit on the board, of which there are the 4 towns. So I joined in place of Jeff Ritter starting in July. The towns involved are Medway, Hopkinton, ourselves, and Ashland. And so this budget is essentially split between the 4 towns. The lines that are split are the supplies and materials, and then the intergovernmental lines there, which I'll get into in a second. And then the last line is benefits. That is the benefits that are used by veterans in our community. We are reimbursed through the cherry sheet for a portion of that. And so, for example, the budget for FY20 was $50,000. We did, on the following year's cherry sheet, received $19,759 from the state to offset those costs. So let me just get very briefly into where we are, the supplies and services. So we all also split different levels of service, what we provide to the regional district. Our accountant and our treasurer collector service this. I believe Ashland handles, communications, cell phones, that nature. So everybody does a sort of different component, as well as splitting the budget here. And then they are housed at 1750 Washington Street. So included in this number here, the Metro West Veterans District 42, is personal services, the shared agent, administrative support, the benefits of the employees, communications, district professional development, municipal agreements, vehicle expense, building rental, supplies and materials, district uniforms, other miscellaneous expenses, and then capital equipment. And so this budget is reviewed again by all the people who sit on, which is the town manager of Medway, Hopkinton, Ashland, and myself. So we reviewed this budget and supported it at our last meeting. And this is the end result for Holliston, which is a $629 increase over FY21, just under 1%.
Any questions, Mrs. Carl?
Nope, no questions.
Ms. Sonic?
No questions.
I do not have any questions. I'll entertain a motion to approve the FY '22 Veteran Services budget at $94,433.
I'll make that motion.
Second it?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. Information technology. Oh,
I
excuse me,
believe we're
Council on
going-
Aging, sorry.
You,
Council on Aging.
hold on.
Hello again, Linda. How are you tonight?
We got Linda.
I'm still
I
well,
believe-
thank you.
Linda, do you have some people with you as well for this budget?
I do. So I have Bob Hopkins. Bob is the vice chair of the COA. Mr. Malone remains away on his trip. So Bob Hopkins is joining me tonight.
Great. I will put it up on the screen for you.
So I did present a budget that is level funded, but I did make some moves. I will acknowledge that all of the moves we made are related to our expenses due to COVID-19 and the way we currently have to do things. There was a decrease in the administrative assistant line, and that's just a reflection of that we brought in a new assistant director this year, and his salary is at a lower rate than the person that he replaced. The regular salaries, that line was designed when we joined the Metro West Regional Transit Authority to cover both vacation, sick time, et cetera, hours for drivers, or any other time that they were providing non-driver related services. In the event that we do not have CARES Act funding or something of the like in next year, I tried to remove any extra funds I could into that line, anticipating that we will need those funds to continue meal delivery at least into the next fiscal year. So I took money also from energy and utilities. A couple of years ago, you may remember that we replaced all the windows, most of the doors, and also had some minor insulation at the roof line installed. And that's definitely shown a reduction in our costs. So I felt that I could easily take $1,500 out of that line. The $1,200 that was removed from buildings and grounds, that was a one-time use approved at the Springtown meeting related to renovations that were required because of Board of Health and Safety violations. So that was a one-time use, so that was taken out. Professional services, I left, moved up slightly to 12.5, and that's just, we switched vendors this year, so that's a slight increase over what we were paying, but very minor. Communications, this one now may be a challenge. I removed money out of that because it was overfunded until 2 days ago when we decided we needed to change our technology to accommodate the ever-growing need. So now there will be a $70 per month charge to go with our new expanded Wi-Fi internet services to meet our needs. So that line there may not cover that. That does include such things as our phone lines, and we have a number of lines at the center. Some communication, postage. We do a newsletter mailing every other month. That in itself is about $600 every other month. So that I'm now uncertain with, but again, that was a change from 2 days ago. Office supplies, even though it looks like we did not spend much this year, and comparatively we did not, and that mostly has to do with because the center is closed. For us, for office supplies, it also includes things like paper towels and toilet paper and trash bags, etc., as well as some of the things we use in the kitchen. If we were normally open, we would serve coffee every single day. Coffee was purchased out of that line, coffee cups, the things needed to do that. So anticipating that at some point in the next fiscal year that we'll start reopening, I hesitate to remove any of those funds because I think they would be needed. Vehicle supplies is at $2,000. One of the reasons we leave that there, one of our responsibilities with the vehicles is if any damage to a vehicle happens while it's in our care, we are responsible for the insurance deductible. So that's why I'd like to leave some of that there. And the rest of it is just minor things that we might need for the vehicles, snow brushes, windshield washer fluid, some containers to hold groceries, things like that. Professional development is for training, but it's also for our dues to the Mass Council on Aging. This year, Mass Council on Aging waived their dues, which is why there's only been 145 taken out of it, but anticipate that those dues will return next year. So then separate from that budget, you'll see that I've also written in, where did it go? Clerical salaries. Did my clerical salaries not show up on here, Travis?
I may not have your version.
Okay, because I have the
I have
same.
Is that the separate memo that you have there?
Well, I have a separate memo supporting it, but I have, anyway, you'll recall from last year that we had requested a part-time administrative assistant due to the continued growth of the senior center and the number of seniors that we serve. Both the select board and the FinCom actually supported the hiring of a new person. And then COVID-19 struck and we went back to a 0% budget. Our numbers.
Linda, would you like me to pull up that supporting document?
Thank you.
Okay.
So what I have done here, and I actually did it because it's being used for a couple of different things. So we were supporting the increase from 2012 to 2019. But I also went back to when I first started here. So the tremendous growth in both the number of seniors in every single program that we run has just exploded over the years. And we still do it with the same staffing level that we were doing in 2012. So to be able to continue to offer the growth in programs, even to maintain what we're currently doing, because we actually can't keep maintaining at the level we are. The COVID vaccine has really pushed us over, but it's incredibly busy. It's a lot of one-on-one. The oldest members of our population are living longer and longer, that we're having to, provide a lot of one-on-one time. Our, 55 to 65-year-olds are not the ones that are taking up the bulk of our time. But when you get to the 80, 85 plus, they are. So we're still requesting a new position at a cost of $21,124 if it was approved.
Travis, can I make a recommendation at this point?
Sure.
It does not appear some of these values are in the budget that's in front of us.
Yeah, so I think it's what Linda's saying. So I have a narrative here from Linda, and I have the supporting documentation for the requested position, which is, again, as Linda said, was the position that had been discussed last year. So I think what we want to do is probably bring back to you a version that includes, it sounds like $840 for communications.
Right.
You said $70 a month, Linda. Is that what you had said we need to
Correct.
add in?
And again, that just changed over the weekend, that $70.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So $840 for communications, and then I think you just said $21,124.
Correct.
Which would be added, let me just pull up the budget again. So you would be looking.
Linda, could I ask you a quick question while Travis is doing some math?
Absolutely.
Did your board vote on this budget?
They did, January 27th.
And was that the budget that included the part-time position, Linda?
Yes, it was.
What was your total?
My total I kept the budgeted position separate, the clerical position totally separate. So my total for the remainder of the budget was $233,226.
Did the council vote on both the base budget and the expanded position, or just the base budget?
They voted on both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so 233, 226 is what we have up here. $840 for communications, which I'll just double check with Chris Mayo after tonight. Gets us where we want to go, and then another 21,124 would bring us to a total of 255,190.
So let me just check with the board to see if they're comfortable making a vote on that revised number, or if they want us to revise the budget and come back next week.
Yeah, I think.
Hold on one second, Linda, okay? Go ahead, Ben.
I just would say, like, I'm fine with the number, but I would prefer a vote from, the board, Council on Aging.
The council on,
They
the
took
council
it.
on aging, the council on aging
with the
voted on the board.
Added
I'm
to,
sorry.
be a different number.
So Ben is suggesting that while the council took on the part-time position vote, they did not vote in the additional communication of 840. Linda?
Correct, 'cause yes, we didn't know that then.
Yeah. When is the council again meeting?
The council again meets this Wednesday, however, we're supposed to present to the FinCom tomorrow night. And Travis, I sent you the budget with the clerical salary in it.
Okay. So the budget that then was approved by the COA would just not include the 840.
Which, at the end of the day, is going to, half of it is theoretically could be covered by CARES.
Theoretically, absolutely.
So it's not the end of the world.
So in that case,
approving it just contingent on the COA approving it in the next meeting.
it's up to you. So with the 840, you come to 255,190. Without the 840, the total is 254,350.
Tina, what do you think?
I have no doubt that the Council on Aging will approve this.
Yeah.
It's in line with everything.
I know they would, but I think
Yeah.
just for protocol, we need to make sure that everything's going.
Yeah, I'm fine with making a motion contingent upon, the COA's approval of the communication increase.
Do you want to finish that sentence as a motion?
I'll make a motion
Include with
then.
the dollar amount?
Yeah, sure, I'll make a motion that we approve the Council on Aging budget for $255,190, contingent upon a Council on Aging approval of an increase to the communications line item of $840.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. All right, Linda, I think you have what you need to get to the Finance Committee. Just let
Thank you
Travis
very much.
know when you have the council's approval on that 840. It's just a matter of bookkeeping, okay?
Okay.
Is that a goodbye, or do you have a question, sir? Bob?
Bob,
Unmute.
you're unmuted, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to let you people know that today I called that 211 number, and it was a very nice call. I was able to schedule both me and my wife for this Thursday. No problems at all. It's so easy to use, and they take the information. They're very courteous, and all I can tell you is it is working very well.
That's good to hear. Nice report.
Good luck on your appointment. Go easy on the workout the next couple of days so you don't get sore before the shot.
Make sure it's leg day.
Yes.
All right, we will move on at this point to, thank you again, Linda. Bob,
Thank
good
you so
night.
much.
Thank you.
Information technology budget. All right.
Uh-oh.
Good evening, Mr. Mayo.
Good evening, thank you for having me.
we weren't allowing any in-person budgets, but Chris demanded a showing in person.
I did.
I kid, of course.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for moving me from last Thursday to today. Basically, once you get loaded there, administrative salaries stays the same as dictated by the guidelines. One new request for next year is in a new part-time salary. Currently, Justin and I have spent 570 hours in meetings, which equates to almost 24 solid days of Zoom meetings. We've had 5,954 participants throughout the first, 9 months. This is as of like January 6th.
How many participants?
5,954 participants through the meetings. So right now, we're estimating about 702 hours throughout a full year at $18 an hour. That's $12,636, and I'm asking to continue the Zoom meetings for next year. Moving from public buildings.
Sorry, Chris.
Yep.
You did check in with people's interest on continuing Zoom, even if
I did. So, I did send out a survey to the department heads that have committees, as well as just chairmen of the committees. Basically, 8 committees wanted IT to continue to run, their meetings. 7 wanted IT support when they needed it, and 5 said they could run themselves. I then reached out to my liaisons. My FinCom liaison got back to me, and he said, he filled it out based on his preference, but he said, if I'm not there, we really want IT to run it, so just budget for running every meeting again next year. So that's what I proposed there.
So that's 12,636, Chris, right?
Yep.
And that's CARES eligible.
Correct. Until either the CARES money runs out or
The deadline comes, one or the other.
correct.
Got it. Keep going, bud.
So new to my budget this year, being moved over from the public building line item, is the copy machine lease and service contract. That decreased by $533 this year because of 2 new leases we signed last year that were a little cheaper than the years before. Also moving over from the public building for the first time this year is the postage, the lease and service contract on the postage machine. This is just the service contract. This does not include the actual postage, which is paid out of the budget from each individual department. One of my biggest increases this year is in professional services. It's increasing by 43% this year. This increase is a result of 2 items. The first item is the 3 remote Zoom licenses and the large 500 participant account, which is $1,050 of the increase. The remaining $835 increase is about 4 years ago, we partnered with the schools to purchase antivirus software. That contract that they signed is now up, and it's up for renewal. I'm estimating an increase in that. The schools have not signed a new contract, so I do not have an actual budget. In addition, when we did this, the police department's computers couldn't run the antivirus software we had. With their new computers we've been rolling out the last few weeks, we are installing our antivirus software on it. So I'm including 24 additional licenses. So those are the increase of those 2 items, Zoom and antivirus. Communications remains the same, and computer license is new again. It's been moved over from the public building, and that is Munis and our website license. Munis is increasing, so that is the big increase there. All of the remaining lines remain the same, which is computer purchase of equipment, which is yearly computer replacement. Next year, the police cruiser laptops have to be replaced. And then the computer equipment of $7,750 is basically everything else, like printer repairs and any other items that we need to purchase for different departments.
Thanks, Chris. Questions, Beth?
The only question I have is for your capital outlay for purchase of equipment and computer equipment. You're asking for the same amount as the prior year. Is there no inflationary pressure on those items?
We basically go out and there hasn't been.
Okay.
We go out and the state has locked in pricing. It hasn't really changed in the last few years. And if
Gone
it
down?
does, yeah.
That's great.
Laptops, PCs going down.
Good. So that was my only question. Chris, thank you for all that you do to manage all this stuff. You're the man behind this, the scenes, the Wizard of Oz, if you will, making sure that everything runs smoothly. So we really appreciate that technical expertise. So thank you, and appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Tina?
Yeah, Chris, do we charge the Zoom license to CARES?
We did the time, yes.
You did? Okay.
That was part of the original Excel spreadsheet from many, many months ago.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say from that, what I'm hearing you say from the survey that you took of department heads is that Zoom will live with us past the end of the state of emergency.
I think that's gonna be up to the select board, because once the state of emergency ends, you will.
Then we have to
You don't
adopt it.
understand that,
Yeah, correct.
bylaw or whatever it is to.
Yep.
But what your survey indicates is that there's an interest. Am I hearing that correctly?
It was probably 50-50. 50 people said continue, and 50% of people said go back to the way it was, so.
Okay, that's it, thanks.
I have no questions, so at this time, I'll ask any questions on the Zoom call for the technology department budget for FY '22. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the FY '22 requested budget for technology at $292,293.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Chris.
Comments from the town administrator, Mr. Ahern.
Okay, all I have at this moment, is a few DPW project updates on bids. The water treatment plant, has a site visit non-mandatory on February 17th. Sub-bid opening is on February 24th, and the general bid opening is on March 10th, keeping in line with the most aggressive timeline that we most recently discussed after December town meeting. Additionally, the Winter Street Water Main project, which was approved at December town meeting, has a bid opening in 2 days. And the drainage and roadway improvement project, which has funding outside of just the December town meeting, but also did have a warrant article on the December 5th town meeting for the drainage and roadway in the Mudville area, has a bid opening scheduled for March 17th. That is in addition to all of the facilities bid openings that I detailed last week. So we're very busy between those two departments, following procurement laws and progressing some very important projects for the town. And that is all I have at the moment.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Travis, I'll have you introduce it, but our folks at DPW are interested in the select board evaluating future use of emergency parking bans for snow and ice removal. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so in some of the discussions that we've had on improving snow and ice service this winter, a couple of things that have come up just to sort of say what can we be doing to sort of help make sure that we're keeping the roads as clear as possible. A couple of trouble areas in town where people have left cars. We do have, as I believe the clerk read, probably 6 weeks in a row leading up to winter, a parking ban from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. from November 1st to March 31st. Another thing that's commonly used in towns of our size is a temporary parking ban. So what I put in here is a recommendation or a request, I suppose, from DPW, and then a recommendation from the Holliston Police Department, saying that in addition to our longstanding winter parking ban overnight, that the HPD would be in support of the Select Board authorizing a temporary parking ban when a known storm is approaching our community, giving the ability to ban parking during daytime hours would be a key component to allow the DPW to maintain the roads efficiently and safely during a storm. MTC, Meade, Tallerman, and Costa did weigh in to sort of make sure that you are aware that this is something that the Select Board absolutely has within its right to do. And I provided some of that background for you. Also, additionally, how that would work when it comes to messaging if the Select Board were interested in doing this in the future. The police chief weighed in on that, obviously utilizing the town website, Blackboard messaging, and social media. This would be based on severity, obviously, depending on the way that we would message it out. Obviously, we do not be looking to tow and ticket if possible, but that would be, at some point needs to be the authorization would potentially be there, making sure that we could clear the roads of cars, which then can clear the roads of snow. So it's an idea that sort of came out of looking at all of our operations, and something that I wanted to make sure I brought to you. If we want to discuss it for the future, we certainly can do that, but at the same point, it's something that I think, is within your ability as a board, and I wanted to make sure I could answer any questions.
Any questions, Beth?
The only question I have is, I'm just trying to understand the logistics of this. Is that, obviously, snow does not conform to our select board, meeting schedules generally. So, let's say hypothetically, we're looking at a Friday storm, we don't, and, things develop very quickly and rapidly. Is there, what would be the mechanism to trigger this? I think a vote isn't practical, but would it be just, an email from the chair? I'm wondering how this would get implemented.
This would be essentially the board authorizing the town administrator or, the police chief, right? It would be you authorizing the use of this, and, we could certainly set, it must be in an estimated storm over this many inches. There's a number of things we could set it based on. At the same point, this would be obviously for more severe cases where we know a storm is coming, we want people off the road, parking off the street, to make sure we have access. And so, at some point, we're all at the mercy of meteorologists. So it can, you don't want to make it too based on any metrics that we can't rely on. But it would have to be for a significant event that we knew was coming. DPW, police, and then probably the town administrator would then have the authorization to declare this. We would then message it out as broadly as possible with as much lead time as possible, just to make sure that we were sort of clearing the roads for the DPW to then clear the roads for the town.
Okay, that's fine.
Tina?
I have some questions. I didn't think I was going to have any questions, and then as I'm listening to this and thinking it through, the goal here is to change behavior. The goal is not to change enforcement. Is that fair to say that we're looking to change the behavior of residents to have them remove their cars so that the plowing can happen? We're not saying, really, the goal here is not to say the police are going to be out there towing cars that are on the street. We're hoping the residents with this policy will take the initiative to move their cars when there's a snow emergency announced for daytime hours.
So I guess it is a little bit of a change in that right now the Holliston Police Department can absolutely ticket, warn, tow if people are breaking the current the current restriction over nighttime between November and March. This is looking at a sort of the ability to then say, outside of just that window, there are other times where we want people to be able to move their cars. A number of these areas that we're looking at are streets that are adjacent to facilities that have parking associated with them that by zoning provide enough parking for the use of it.
Well, that's what I wanted to make sure, that if we're looking for a change in behavior of residents, that they actually have that option to change their behavior, that we're not just putting somebody in a corner to say, you have no other choice but to park on the street. Now we're telling you you can't park on the street, and now, now we're just...
And so there are, I've been through this in towns that I've lived in, cities I've lived in, all different areas, right? In those instances, what you always want to be able to do potentially is say, I have nowhere else to go, where do you want me to put my car? And then we say, here's a municipal lot that's closest to you.
All right, well, that was my next question. So where we don't have, if we were to have a residence that that only has on-street parking, they would be directed then to go to a municipal lot.
That would have to be the mechanism, to say if you don't have another option, these are municipal lots that we would make available.
Okay, and there's no signage in the municipal lots that say no parking during a snow emergency or anything like that? It's clear that you could park there.
There's an overnight exclusion.
There's an overnight exclusion.
So that would have to be a component of this one.
Okay. All right, and then are you sure you want this on your plate? Because this puts you right in the territory of the school superintendent looking at school closures, trying to factor all the meteorological information and the right decision-making to pull the trigger on this is a significant event. There's going to be a parking ban.
I recognize that. I think this is, right, this is not going to be used with a significant amount of frequency. This is for the largest events that we all know are coming. I would think that they would line up very easily with something something that would also
Yeah.
probably trigger a school.
Okay, I was wondering if you were making that connection. And so it sounds like the only thing that really might need to change then is that the municipal lots are posted, no overnight parking, with the exception of a snow, like that's gonna have to be addressed, because there will be some residents that have to use the municipal lot overnight during a snow emergency.
Yeah, I think in some instances, you know, there are not a lot of areas, but there are some, the ones that are sort of been identified as trouble areas where we have people on the streets and we end up
Yep.
plowing around them, those types of things.
They have.
Those are, most of those that I'm aware of that we're looking at have the parking that is zoned for that use of those. But you're right, there are other areas in town that are more heavily populated where you may have to be able to say, we need you to move your car off the street, there is no on-street parking during this event, and here is where you can put it, and then it would have to be, you know, we do have municipal lots that we would have to look at.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, I don't have any questions, so I'll entertain a motion, at this point, I'll make the motion, to enable the town administrator as our designee to declare certain events as overnight prohibited parking, related to the winter parking ban. Would that be sufficient motion, Travis?
So you mentioned overnight, this would be potentially, not restricted by time of day.
Making it illegal to park in the street during a storm any hour of the day, as stated. Right. All right. Motion.
Second?
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries. Good luck with that, Travis.
I mean, I think the DPW.
Board business, Mr. Farrell, land donation off of Adams Street.
Yeah, so I'll make the Conservation Commission is approved this land donation. We are approving a land donation off of Adams Street. It is owned by Karen Paul and her husband Stephen Paul. So I will make a motion to accept this land donation off of Adams Street, as designated by the Conservation Commission in their approval.
I have a motion, to a second.
I will second that motion.
Any questions?
Any donation is fantastic. Does it connect any parcels? Is there a significance to this particular parcel of land? Do we know? It's not defined.
The Conservation Commission was interested in it. The only tricky part of it is the very little bit of taxes that were due that can essentially be scooped up in one of those revolving funds, of the Conservation Commission. I do not know specifically what their interest is in it. And I can certainly text Ryan if we'd want to know. But the Conservation Commission is interested, that's all I know.
In 22 acres. Okay. That was my question, John.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries. The Highway Department requesting, to overspend the snow and ice budget. Do you have that letter handy, or do you want me to read it, Ben?
Hold on.
I have it here if you don't.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah. Okay, as of February 3rd, 2021, the snow and ice budget balance is $113,672, which is 54% of the total. This week, invoices totaling $22,113 were submitted to the town account for payment. With several weeks left in the winter season, we're requesting authorization to overspend this budget if necessary. I'll entertain a motion to provide the authority to the Highway Department to overspend its snow and ice budget for FY '21.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries.
And I'll also mention just the snow and ice is a budget that is allowed to go into deficit, and we do get compensation sometimes from the state.
Next item, donation to the Holliston Police Department by Mr. Vincent Tronfio. You have that document?
Yes. I will make a motion to accept a donation to the Holliston Police Department from Vincent Tronfio of 726 Washington Street in the amount of $400, and this is received by to the Police Department gift account.
Very good. I have a motion. I have a second.
Second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. We're next on to the proclamation of Holliston's oldest veteran, Charles Nickerson. I see joining us tonight was Steve Bradford. How are you this evening, Steve?
I'm fine. How are you?
Well, if you'd like to take minutes to introduce the issue of Holliston's oldest veteran, who you declare it to be, a little bit of background, would appreciate it.
Sure. In 2013, I believe it was, we decided that between the American Legion and the then Select Board, that we would like to honor our oldest living veteran in town. And as you all know, our previous one, Vasco Bravelli, passed away a couple of months ago. And what happens is we go through the census list, we see who the next veteran would be. And in this case, it's Charlie Nickerson. Charlie was World War II vet, 82nd Airborne, jumped both D-Day and Battle of the Bulge. And part of doing this is we have the plaque outside the town clerk's office engraved. That's been done. I'll rehang that tomorrow. And we asked for proclamations from the Select Board, our state rep Carolyn Dykema and Senate President Spilka, and there's also one from the governor. And of course, we'd like to have a little ceremony when we do that. This, with the pandemic, I don't want to subject a 95-year-old to having to put up with us. We'll find another way to get the citations to him. Bob Hopkins has spoken with Charlie. He's excited about this. Bobby Blair was supposed to do an interview with Charlie today, so there'll be an upcoming article in the Reporter. And I hope he's our oldest veteran for a long time.
Thank you very much, Steve. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to read the proclamation prepared for Mr. Nickerson.
Sure, this is a proclamation from the town of Holliston for Charles Nickerson. Whereas Charles Nickerson is currently Holliston's oldest veteran, and whereas he enlisted in the U.S. Army at age 18, and whereas he was a fearless paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne, whereas with successful jumps into Normandy on D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge, whereas he finished his military career during World War II in Berlin, whereas because of his bravery, he was awarded 2 Silver Stars and Oak Leaf Clusters, whereas Holliston is so very proud of our hometown hero. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board of the Town of Holliston, do hereby, on February 8th, 2021, announce that it is Charles Nickerson Day.
Thank you very much, Ben. Steve, if you'd be so kind as to pass along the Select Board's deepest gratitude to Mr. Nickerson for his service and our profound humility at his heroism. Quite a story there, and I look forward to Bobby Blair's coverage of Mr. Nickerson's life in more detail. Remarkable man.
I certainly will, and thanks for the support from the Select Board.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on. Travis, we have a VFW Annual Memorial Day appointments. Do you have that handy?
I do.
Ben.
Okay. So I have 3 appointments here, representatives for the Memorial Day Committee for 2021. So I'll read this letter here. It's, be it known that at board meeting of the officers and directors on January 21st, 2021, it was and agreed to that the following individuals are authorized as the Leonard D. Chessmore, VFW Post 8507 representatives for the Memorial Day Committee for 2021. Ronald G. Turcott of 230 Hollis Street, Charles Jacobs of 146 Cedar Street, and Keith Umloff of 80 Juniper Road. So I guess we'll make a motion
Yes, if you would be so kind.
I'll make a motion to appoint these 3 gentlemen that I just read as the representatives for the Memorial Day Committee from the VFW Post 8507.
A motion of a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And carried. Other business, Mr. Scarrow.
I have no other business.
Tina?
No other business, except I believe we are gonna enter into executive session, you already know.
I actually think we might be postponing that.
We'll postpone that. Yeah.
Oh,
That's good, all right?
I would like to delay that.
Delay that previous remark.
Very well. Just, one item, I'm on vacation next week, so I won't be around. Ms. Hine, hopefully, this vice chairwoman, you'll be around. Be our meeting, have fun. Other than that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Holliston, have a great evening, and a great long weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.